Isolated from the mainland and hidden behind the scenic cliffs of Jersey, HMP La Moye looks nothing like Britain's aging prisons, but don't let its fresh paint and quiet reputation deceive you. What's happening behind its well-kept walls is a complex picture of a prison at odds with its own identity, a place that balances moments of good practice with pockets of stagnation, a facility where small size does not always equal greater safety or dignity. While La Moye may present itself as a model of island justice, its foundations are not as steady as they appear. Beneath the surface lies an institution wrestling with cracks in oversight, confusion in resettlement, and a population growing more complex by the year. The prison holds just over 130 inmates, making it one of the smallest inspected in the British Isles. And yet, even with such a small population, inspectors uncovered deep concerns. The prison is split into several wings: A, B, C, D and F wing for female prisoners. There's also a separate segregation unit, a healthcare department, and areas dedicated to substance misuse recovery and psychological support. On paper, this structure should allow for personalized care, good relationships, and rehabilitative progress. But while some wings offer decency and predictability, others are marred by unpredictability, a lack of access to meaningful activity, and staff shortages that undermine any sense of safety or routine. Let's begin with living conditions. While most wings were found to be clean and well maintained, several areas lack privacy and dignity. Shared toilets without screening, insufficient shower access on some wings, and patchy ventilation have become accepted realities. In the female unit, despite a smaller population, inspectors noted a shortage of activity, and women reported feeling ignored in the wider prison dynamic. Their wing felt like an afterthought, not an integrated part of the prison. The segregation unit, meanwhile, remains a bleak environment: bare cells, poor natural light, and a regime based more on removal than support. The most pressing issue at La Moye, however, is the prison's approach to rehabilitation and progression. Despite a relatively calm regime, prisoners told inspectors they often felt stuck in limbo. Access to education and work was uneven. Workshops were regularly closed due to staff absence, and some educational classes failed to reflect the needs of long-term prisoners. Vocational training, although available, reached only a small fraction of the population. It's a bitter irony: fewer prisoners, but still too many for the system to meaningfully engage. And that's before considering the complications of sentence planning and release preparation, which have grown increasingly dysfunctional. Prisoners nearing release describe confusion and anxiety. Coordination between the prison and Jersey probation was poor. Sentence progression was not clearly explained. Some prisoners didn't even know what category they were or what was expected of them to move forward. The island's unique legal status adds layers of bureaucracy that too often leave prisoners stranded in uncertainty. For a system that claims to focus on reintegration, this is a catastrophic oversight. Drugs remain a growing threat, even in an isolated environment. There were multiple reports of prescription medication misuse, and some evidence of illicit drugs entering the prison through legal mail or visits. Testing procedures were not consistent. While La Moye had taken steps to increase intelligence-led searches, it still lacked key tools like a full-body scanner. The island setting does not insulate it from the mainland's drug epidemic. It merely delays the spread. Violence was not widespread, but what incidents did occur were serious and often preventable. Bullying, coercion, and intimidation were present, particularly among younger inmates or those in debt due to drug use. Some prisoners were kept in segregation or isolated on the wings for extended periods for their own protection, in what amounted to unofficial solitary confinement. Despite this, the prison had no coherent violence reduction strategy, and staff were unsure how to escalate complex behavior cases. Mental health provision was mixed. The prison does have a small but competent psychological team and a part-time psychiatrist, but referrals are slow. Waiting lists for assessments drag on. Many prisoners with underlying trauma, addiction, or neurodivergence were not receiving the specialist care they required. There was no neurodiversity strategy at all. prisoners struggling with ADHD, autism, or cognitive disabilities were often misunderstood by staff and punished for behavior they could not control. In one case, a prisoner with clear learning difficulties was placed in the segregation unit after repeated behavioral incidents because no one could agree on a care plan. Relationships between staff and prisoners were generally described as respectful, but this masks deeper issues. A lack of consistency in the staffing rota means prisoners can go days without seeing their key worker. Many staff are new, inexperienced, or unsure how to challenge poor behavior. Others are burned out and disengaged. While Jersey offers better pay and conditions than many mainland prisons, that has not translated into better supervision or more personal interaction. The prison relies heavily on goodwill, and when that fails, it has little left to fall back on. Facilities are limited. The gym is underused due to staffing problems. The library, while stocked, is rarely open. Visits are inconsistent, and video calling is still in its infancy. The prison chapel is one of the few bright spots, with a dedicated chaplaincy team providing support across faiths. But even there, attendance is patchy due to regime clashes. The healthcare centre functions adequately, but it's stretched. Prisoners with complex physical needs often wait weeks for external appointments, and emergency responses to medical incidents are slower than acceptable. Leadership talks of change. There are action plans, governance reviews, and prisoner voice meetings, but it's unclear whether these efforts are reaching the men and women on the wings. Many prisoners told inspectors they didn't feel heard. Complaints were routinely ignored or met with hostility. One prisoner submitted 17 complaints in 3 months. None received a written response. Another said he gave up filing complaints because nothing ever changes. There is no doubt that La Moye benefits from its smaller size and relative calm, but that calm is deceptive. It's not the calm of a well-run prison. It's the quiet drift of an institution coasting on its isolation, untouched by national reform and largely invisible to public scrutiny. So we must ask, if this is how a small, well-funded prison performs, what chance do the rest of them have? How can a prison on an island still suffer from the same violence, the same confusion, and the same failures of care? Is La Moye really safer, or is it just better at hiding the cracks? What does it say about a justice system when even in one of its smallest prisons, progress is stalled, prisoners feel forgotten, and rehabilitation is little more than a word? Let us know what you think. Is HMP La Moye an overlooked failure hiding behind good PR? Or does it prove that size alone means nothing when the system itself is broken? For Governor Susie Richardson, success isn't when prisoners behave well in prison. It's when they do well after release, she tells Ben Leitman. When Susie Richardson became governor of La Moye Prison in 2021, she discovered that tea bags were banned throughout the jail. Prisoners had to use instant tea instead. When she asked why, she was told that if prisoners were allowed tea bags, they might smoke the tea. One of her first reforms was to lift the ban. There was uproar, she recalls. A member of staff left over it because he thought I was being reckless introducing tea bags, but I felt the policy was deeply institutionalized and unnecessary. Since we introduced tea bags, prisoners haven't smoked them, but even if they did, we could have managed that risk. La Moye is unusual. As the only jail on the Channel Island of Jersey, its 140 residents include men and women, lifers and people awaiting trial, adults and, occasionally, children. As a British Crown dependency, Jersey is self-governing, with its own legal and prison systems. The island can make its own rules, and often does. Miss Richardson is both governor and head of the island's prison service, giving her the powers she needs to transform La Moye. Describing the atmosphere when she arrived, Miss Richardson says, "The aim of this prison was merely to hold people securely in custody. It didn't really focus on release or resettlement. It was focused on driving good behavior in prison. That has all changed." She says, "I want this to be a safe space where people can deal with the root cause of their crime. For me, it's not all about good behavior in prison. It's about making sure we're tackling really difficult stuff and preparing for release. Tea bags were just the start. Like many jails, La Moye had a prison council where prisoners made suggestions, but there was no one to write down what was said, so the ideas never led anywhere. Against staff resistance, Miss Richardson appointed a prisoner to take minutes. Now it's really well embedded and brilliant, she says. Prisoners drive that meeting and keep all the records and hold us to account for actions. A few prisoners now help maintenance staff to carry out repairs, even in parts of the jail that were previously off limits. One female prisoner worked with our all-male engineering team and got so into it that she's now doing an engineering apprenticeship in the community, Richardson says with pride. Further examples of innovation include coaching training for all staff and the appointment of ex-prisoners to a panel which will assess people applying to become prison officers. To get her colleagues behind her approach, Miss Richardson led a group of them on a trip to Norway, a country held up as a model for prisons, focusing on rehabilitation, not punishment. Miss Richardson, 41, began her career as a psychologist, then became a prison officer and rose through the ranks. She has worked in 8 English prisons, including as deputy governor at a men's jail, Winchester, and a women's jail, Eastwood Park. Prison leavers anywhere can face stigma and rejection when seeking jobs or housing. As an island with a population of 100,000, Jersey is a place where people tend to know one another's business. As Miss Richardson puts it, almost everyone knows somebody in prison. She has launched a social media campaign called Number Releasing Better Neighbours and spends time talking to churches and business groups to try to convince them that, as she puts it, rehabilitation is a whole island responsibility. She says, it's not about being soft, it's about following what the evidence says. Around 60% of prisoners at La Moye come from Jersey. Others are from the UK or overseas, and for some, prison comes as a shock. We receive drug dealers from the UK who will come to Jersey on a plane, look to make a drop-off, and get arrested here. Sometimes that would be someone who has dropped their child in the morning at school and thinks they'll make it back for school pickup, but end up spending a few years with us. Sentencing is quite harsh here. Prisoners from the UK can request a transfer to serve their sentence in an English or Scottish prison, but most choose to serve their time at La Moye. For Miss Richardson, becoming Jersey's first female prison governor meant relocating her family, husband, 3 children, and a golden retriever. She enjoys the island lifestyle, and as prisons on the mainland struggle with a capacity crisis, staff shortages, restricted regimes, violence and drugs, she also enjoys her job. It's a real privilege to be working in such a well-resourced prison with 100 spare beds, and the pay is very good for prison officers here, so it's a highly regarded role, she says. I feel quite guilty, actually, running such a nice prison when I've got colleagues running such challenging prisons in the UK. For 2 years, one of the UK's most feared drug lords, Curtis "Cocky" Warren, allegedly carried on a steamy and illicit relationship with the very woman tasked with helping inmates escape addiction. The shocking part, it happened right under the noses of prison officers, inside his own cell at HMP La Moye. Teresa Rodriguez, a former senior manager and drug counselor at the prison, has broken her silence in a bombshell confession, revealing how she fell head over heels for the man once dubbed Target 1 by Interpol. Curtis Warren, a former bouncer from Liverpool, who amassed a reported £300 million fortune through global drug trafficking, allegedly seduced Rodriguez from inside cell B47, where, according to her, they had sex most days. Yes, it was insane, Miss Rodriguez admits, but I was in love like never before. I still am. At the time, Mr. Warren was awaiting trial for a £1 million cannabis smuggling plot in Jersey. He had already become a household name due to his criminal empire and his uncanny ability to outwit authorities. He once made the Sunday Times Rich List and famously taunted customs officers mid-trial. But it wasn't just the law he defied, it was the entire prison system. Miss Rodriguez describes a covert romance that played out while officers patrolled just feet away. Inmates allegedly acted as lookouts, whistling to warn them of incoming staff. Her role as the head of the prison's substance misuse unit offered her easy access to Warren's cell, and according to her, our love overrode everything. She confesses, "Sometimes we kissed in my office, but we only ever had sex in his cell. He called it mushy, mushy time. If we'd been caught, he would have been moved, and I'd have lost my job. Our love was on the line." But how did a respected professional woman from a conservative Lisbon family fall for a man known for extreme violence, including allegedly kicking another inmate to death? "He had this charisma and charm," she explains. "He was like an old-fashioned gentleman, very polite, very confident. He was nothing like the others." Miss Rodriguez, who now runs a cake decorating and crafts business in Lisbon, reflects on her double life with almost surreal detachment. She acknowledges the irony. She once battled heroin addiction herself, overcame it, and dedicated her career to helping others, but found herself swept into the arms of the very man feeding the trade. Their trysts began with a kiss. "I initiated it," she admits. "I just felt this intense attraction. My heart would leap every time I saw him." Mr. Warren's control within the prison was reportedly so significant that he even had flowers and a mobile phone delivered to Miss Rodriguez's apartment, a staggering breach of prison protocol if true. Miss Rodriguez claims they remain in contact by letter and phone, and still speaks of him with affection. "I wasn't one of those women writing to a criminal they'd never met," she insists. "I fell in love with the man I got to know." Now in her mid-40s, she admits her feelings haven't faded, even after Mr. Warren was transferred to HMP Belmarsh in 2009 to serve a 13-year sentence. Though he was due for release recently, Warren has refused to hand over £198 million in criminal assets and now faces another 10 years unless he pays. Miss Rodriguez still clings to hope. She keeps his letters. One reads, "I need mushy, mushy time with you. Take care. Love, Curtis X." The affair raises serious questions. How did a high-ranking prison counselor conduct a 2-year relationship with a notorious inmate without being caught? Were staff aware and complicit, or simply negligent? And what does this say about the control figures like Mr. Warren still exert behind bars? Despite the seriousness of the allegations, Mr. Warren's legal team has declined to confirm or deny the affair, stating he does not wish to authenticate the story. HMP La Moye, Jersey's only prison, has remained tight-lipped. Governor Bill Miller has refused to comment. This case blurs the line between professional duty and personal weakness, between rehabilitation and romantic delusion. Was this a story of forbidden love or calculated manipulation? And if Curtis Warren could orchestrate a relationship from behind bars, what else might he be orchestrating? What do you think? Did love truly override everything? Or was Teresa Rodriguez just another pawn in the hands of Britain's most dangerous drug lord? Let us know your thoughts below.